Well, in my opinion, this is a very analytically shallow and immature way of looking at things. I would venture to guess that these same types of people are shallow and immature in other areas, in life, in deen, in relationships, because it reflects a superficial and self-indulgent mentality, a mentality that doesn't really understand sacrifice or effort, only gratification, really. Because you're clearly not following events, you're clearly not following the news, not properly, not closely. You're not even really aware of what's happening in any genuinely informed way. You just consume headlines. And even that, you just started consuming headlines. You clearly haven't even been following events probably before October 7th. You have no real background on the issue. You have no real background on the region. And you feel no necessity, no duty to become informed. All you have to do is feel emotional outrage, You think that your emotional outrage is as far as your duty extends. All you have to do is look at the horrific pictures and get upset about them and vent. And that's the extent of your commitment to the issue. That's the extent of your duty. And then, of course, your outrage must be appeased and placated. Well, it's just obnoxious to me. I would guess that this is the kind of person who is generally only grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when they get what they want, and who thinks that they're being heroic and stoic and brave when they endure any sort of inconvenience or trivial hardship. They're not the kind of person, in my opinion, most likely, who even recognizes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is preventing disasters from striking them at every moment that they live, and that they should be grateful for that. Not just grateful for the nice things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestows upon them, but grateful also for the difficulties and the afflictions that He withholds from them. All of the things that that they've never had to suffer. The infinite possible tragedies that have never struck them. Because look, let me explain to you what we would be looking at right now if things had gone as planned after October 7th. Right after October 7th, the clear and explicit plan was for everyone in northern Gaza to be expelled into the Sinai. And the neocons in Washington immediately began making moves. If you've been following, they've made moves to escalate the war. The U.S. deployed battleships into the Mediterranean for the sole purpose of launching an attack against Iran. So the plan was to expel the Palestinians, seize their land, and commence a war against Iran. That was obvious to everyone. That was obvious to at least anyone who was familiar with the region, who's familiar with Washington, who's familiar with the neocons, and who bothered to even notice all of the steps that were being taken and the statements that were being made at that time in early October, even mid-October. So if things had proceeded as planned, we would be looking at even higher casualties in Gaza. We'd be looking at the expulsion of the population into Sinai. We'd be looking at a refugee crisis in Egypt, the annexation of northern Gaza by the Israelis, and a bombardment of Tehran, which would have resulted in at least tens of thousands of civilian deaths. And of course, that would ignite the entire region, as Iran would inevitably retaliate, and they would retaliate against whoever was close enough for them to hit. That would mean the Khalij, for one. They've done it before. So then everything that has been built and everything that they are building in the Gulf, in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, all of that would be destroyed. Basically, OPEC would be captured by the United States. And any potential economic sovereignty and political independence that they're trying to build would be in ruins. And in fact, the entire global project of multipolarity would be blown apart. And again, we would be looking at cataclysmic region-wide casualties. Mind you, that was the plan in October. And Egypt would have capitulated to the expulsion of the Palestinians. Refugees would be in camps right now in the desert in Sinai, being fed, if they were fed at all, by Western aid agencies, or else they'd be starving. And whatever economy Egypt has would be hemorrhaging and dying. Lebanon would be ripped to shreds. That was the plan in early October. And it wasn't obscure, it wasn't secret. So that's what you would be looking at right now, if it hadn't been for the diplomacy and coordination of the Arab states, the Muslim states, and the BRICS nations. So that's what would have happened. But what actually did happen as a result of the coordinated and unified diplomacy of the Muslim states, particularly the Arab states, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the UAE, Jordan, and so on, as well as the BRICS nations, like I said. So what happened? The U.S. reversed their position on the expulsion of the Palestinians. Now they've said that the borders of Gaza, they would not accept for the borders of Gaza to be changed. There was a ceasefire, and there will be again. Humanitarian aid entered Gaza. The war has not escalated significantly beyond Palestine. The U.S. is now saying that Hamas just shouldn't be allowed to attack Israel from Gaza, but they're no longer talking about eradicating Hamas completely. Now the ICC is seriously investigating Israel for war crimes. The U.S. Is adopting measures against settlements in the West Bank. Obviously, that's just a gesture, but it's something. Influence politically over the entire Palestinian issue is shifting away from the Americans. Netanyahu's government is on the brink of collapse. Discussion now is turning towards the establishment of a Palestinian state. We haven't talked about that in decades. Egypt is standing up to America. Jordan is standing up to America. Even Abu Mazen of the Palestinian Authority is standing up to America. Every suggestion that the U.S. makes for dealing with the conflict gets shot down. They wanted the Palestinian Authority to take responsibility for security in Gaza. And Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, remarkably refused. And then they wanted Egypt to take responsibility for security in Gaza, and Sisi refused, remarkably. They wanted the UN to take responsibility for security in Gaza, and that's a dead end in the General Assembly. And now there's talk about a BRICS force moving into Gaza at some point, which would drastically change the ability of Israel to continue its genocidal policies and to continue its blockade of Gaza. And it would substantially change the whole dynamic between Gaza and Israel permanently. None of this would have happened. None of this could have happened without the diplomacy of the Arab world, without the diplomacy of the BRICS nations, the coordination between the Arab world and the BRICS nations and the Muslim states. None of that would have happened. And without that coordination, without that unity, and without that influence, there would have been nothing whatsoever to stop the original plans from early October. After October 7th, there was nothing to stop those plans from being pursued by Israel and by the West. Much worse catastrophes have been prevented, and considerable achievements have actually occurred. For anyone who is actually paying attention, for anyone whose eyes are open and whose mind is not clouded by bias and propaganda, you'll see that the strategy of the Arab world and the BRICS nations has been masterful. And in fact, actual diplomats and actual seasoned analysts can't help but acknowledge this. The only people who can't seem to see it are Muslims who are ruled by their emotions and who are being subjected to a relentless barrage of propaganda by pseudo-analysts who align themselves with Washington neocons and political opposition groups in the Muslim world. People who have an axe to grind and whose so-called analysis is overflowing with condemnation of Muslim rulers, but almost no criticism or condemnation of the Western governments and institutions that are funding, arming, and sponsoring the Zionist colonial project. I think it's absolutely reprehensible at a time like this to try to use the crisis in Gaza to sow discord and division in the Muslim world, to try to divert the anger and the anguish of the Muslims away from the Western colonialist powers and instead redirect that anger and anguish towards their own governments. I mean, who are you really trying to protect? It clearly isn't the Palestinians. The only people who benefit from this kind of propaganda are the Western powers, are the Western colonizing powers. The unity that has been demonstrated so far by the Arab and Muslim states, the wielding of unified political influence, has successfully stymied the original plans of Israel and of the West that they had after October 7th. Why, there would be nothing that they would like better than for the Muslim and the Arab governments to be sabotaged by civil unrest and rebellion right now, at this particular time, to make them busy with domestic disruption and upheaval to undermine their ability to concentrate on maintaining pressure on the West. I mean, look, it's fine. It's completely understandable. It's completely right to be morally outraged about what's happening in Gaza. It's totally justified to be in grief and anguish and to want more to be done to stop the carnage. Obviously, that's right and justified. But you should be able to feel all of those things and still recognize what has been done and what's being done. And you should be able to understand what has been prevented from happening because of what's being done. You should be able to recognize that. And furthermore, you should have enough sense to know where the blame truly lies. You should have enough sense to know that all of your anger and all of your outrage and all of your resentment should be directed exclusively at the Western colonizing powers and their institutions. And you should be intelligent enough to know that whoever is trying to divert your anger from them towards the Muslims instead, well, that's someone who is clearly collaborating with the colonizers, not working against the colonizers, but working for them, either on purpose because they're quisling or inadvertently because they're just misguided and foolish. Now, I don't care if you call me names about this. I know this is one of the most unpopular positions that I take. It would be incredibly easy to not say what I'm saying, to just go along with the emotional anti-government propaganda, the anti-Arab government propaganda, and to pander to the manipulated, colonized mindset that pretends to care about the Muslims precisely by hating all of the Muslim governments. I could easily ride that train and get all the likes and get all the shares and what have you. That doesn't require much. That doesn't require anything. Being a demagogue is easy. But if you are genuinely informed, you will immediately recognize that these people, these pseudo-analysts, are nothing but dishonest propagandists. They deliver half-truths, exaggerations, misrepresentations, and flat-out lies. They twist information. And if it isn't due to misguidance, then it's due to malice. But either way, it's destructive. And it serves only the interests of our enemies. So I'll keep saying it. And I'll just start the timer for the countdown to the moment when I get to say I told you so. Look, I'm as used to being maligned as I am used to being right. So it doesn't bother me. I don't take it personally. You shouldn't feel one way or another about the truth. It is what it is. And telling the truth shouldn't be confused with advocacy or endorsement. It's simply trying to state reality as it actually is. The good, bad, beautiful, and ugly. And the fact of the matter is that the whole dynamic in the Middle East is changing right now. And it's changing because of the efforts being made by the Arab and Muslim states and by BRICS. And the fact of the matter is that catastrophic region-wide destruction has been held back by those efforts, even while it is also a fact that the coordination and diplomacy that has succeeded in holding back that catastrophic destruction has not been successful in preventing the deaths of some 17,000 innocent Gazans. All of those are facts. But it's also a fact that the threat of region-wide war has not yet been completely defused. Now, I don't see why anyone should quarrel with any of these facts being acknowledged as facts. If you want to feel some kind of way about it, that's up to you. But you don't get to lie and distort and deny facts and reality just because of your feelings.